Okay. Oh my God. Wow. You did it.
I'm a master.
Yeah.
Jedi.
Yeah. Um,
Love
I,
afraid.
yeah, I just figured that we would, like, we could kind of slide into talking about Hegel. Yeah, I guess that's good. Now that we've started recording, because I don't mean to keep harping on this one person who is in the comments, but this person wrote this comment. The rose-colored glasses person who was in the Discord wrote a YouTube comment once that was like some timestamp, like 3600, and it was like, "This is where the sensible like dialogue begins," and I was like, "What? Hey, come on!" But I was like, "That's probably true. We're probably talking about nothing for a little bit. That's probably completely fair." And
Yeah,
so
I mean personally I like the introductions, I like to ease in to the, but I guess if you're going into the recording, maybe you want to get right into the sensible.
yes, yes.
They use the word sensible.
Yeah, I swear to God.
I mean, everything in Hegel is sensible, right? Because we've gone beyond sense certainty, so we're there. Everything is sensible, right?
Let's go. Let's go to the YouTube videos and scrub for every comment, and then comment on and critique every person who has ever said anything about us on those YouTube. Let's see. Did they say
God.
sensible? How fucking dare they? Yeah.
We're not stuck at sense certainty. We've sublated past that.
Yes, haven't we?
No, I don't know.
I would
I'm so
say
lost
I
still.
would say that, or maybe like I figured maybe a good segue would be to call that person just evil.
Right. There you go. Right.
Just
Because
be
that's
like,
selfish. Well, evil is selfish, but God is evil too, because we realized that in this reading. So it was.
Well, I really wanted to, if you don't mind, Joe, I wanted to, obviously I haven't been able to digest everything you've typed, but would it make a difference if instead of saying God is evil, God is capable of evil?
I don't know. I mean, that's part of what I believe this chapter was reading on towards the end, was that the problem was evil was because God is for himself with creation, and then through the reconciliation and birth of Christ was for another, which led to kind of a recommunion with himself that has to be emulated within the spiritually sublated, educated religious community.
So the creation of the universe was kind of like God is the ultimate artiste. He was just expressing himself and not really interested in the outcome. It was just he was doing this for his own reasons, his own artistic vision. And I'm not making fun of that interpretation by saying it that way, but when you said it, it struck me as, art for itself, not for anything else, not for a greater project, but art for and in itself.
Yeah, let me dive in. There was a couple of parts in the text I highlighted it for it because it's like in section 773 where he said nature is already withdrawn into itself on account of evil. Man must withdraw into himself, but evil is itself withdrawing into self. So in a way, it's almost like he's saying evil is a necessary step of the sublation process for spirit as God. So as we in our unhappy consciousness withdraw into ourself and can't understand spirit, that is the aspect of evil that I understood for Hegel. And it withdrew out of itself and became for another through, as we are for another in a community, just as God became born or spirit became born in the Christ figure.
I think that an aspect of a thing I want to point to, I guess, that I think is important in kind of responding to the question of the thoughts that Ed raised. My sense is that especially from, let me see here, there should be yes, Okay, before 447, let me see if I could find the exact
We like
section number.
we skipped like right to the end.
Yes, I
Maybe we
know.
should like
Yes,
start
yes,
like leave
maybe,
evil for the
maybe
last
so.
part.
Maybe so, but just to get this out of the way. Yes, on page 4. On page 4.
And for the morons who got the
40.
wrong translation, like me, if you could just mention the section, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Do you have the A.V. Miller translation?
Let me find out.
Is it the
This guy.
yeah, that's A.V. Miller. That translation is a little questionable at certain parts, at least as far as I'm aware. Anyway, I hope it's been good. The point is,
I couldn't tell you if it's bad.
on page 444. Let's see, section 776, 775, and 776. Okay. In 775 and 776, I think that, and actually 774 as well. So 774 through 76, I think that Hegel kind of approaches the question of like, should we say that God is evil or is capable of evil in his freedom? Because I think Schelling, I don't know, Ed, if you were you here with us during the Schelling readings? Did you do the Schelling? Because I think that's fine, but Schelling, the only reason I bring it up is because Schelling makes an argument like that. He says God has the freedom to do evil. He has this ultimate, undeniable, absolute freedom, in this particularity and in this personality. Schelling really tried to insist on the personality of God, and the aspect of personality that I think that Schelling tried to focus on. This is getting into sort of a more sort of just the approaches of the two writers, Schelling and Hegel, towards God. I think that Schelling was more focused on the freedom that a personality has, i.e., being in some way decisionally capable or oriented, rather than being totally predestined or only able to follow one path, only able to do good all the time. No, God is God. God has absolute power. He can do evil. He could, sure. And there's nothing you and I could do to stop him or question him. That's it. And it would all be a part of his relationship to evil, in his acquisition of evil, in lifting that evil up and apprehending from it the good, lifting out of that evil, in fact, a part of that evil, which is the good, that's grounded in the darkness and in the evil aspect, the aspect of the nether realm or the dark. But Hegel, I think, is more focused on the aspect of this divine essence that has personality in a way, but in a much different form of personality than Schelling. I think that Schelling has, in a way, a conception of what a personality or an experience or an individual being or consciousness or spirit is. And Hegel has a much different conception. And I guess I'm just saying, it seems like Schelling lays out a system of rules and says, it seems like God would follow this because he's ultimately free. He's the absolute power. Hegel is pointing to this set of principles, right, that from which we can derive, whatever we feel about postulating or positing about the nature of God or his, attitudes or his freedom or whatever. But what we can say is that for him to be cognizable or thought or at all, to make sense as a term, when we say the word God, it has to operate within this frame that comes with certain rules. And that frame for Hegel is the one of spirit. And this frame, this spiritual shape or this spiritual frame comes with some weird idiosyncrasies, some weird eccentricities, and some rules that it has to follow. And I guess one of them would be like in 774 and 775 and 776. I think that the basic point is that spirit in a way presupposes itself, right? And that's, I forget what part of it is that he talks about it, the evil presupposing itself. Actually, I think I have it. Oh, whatever. But the illustration that he uses to basically, I guess, describe this frame that I talked about, this frame within which we can even think about God, right? The way, with this frame that we're in, from which we can speak about God, he the way that he illustrates the concept is through the fall from the Garden of Eden, right? He says in that same section, 775, where he talks about evil and taking the inward turn and so on. It doesn't really get into the evil aspect, but he starts talking about that taking of the inward turn that Joseph was talking about, that is evil, right? That taking of the inward turn. He says that spirit, it enters into existence and it has an immediate existence, which is that it creates its own world. Spirit enters into this objective universal aspect, this existence, this realm of being, this domain of consistent, seemingly stable, reliable objects, or the storehouse of reliability for my concept of knowledge or truth, etc. You know what I mean? And that existence, right, is this, unfortunately, right, from the Hegel, the way he's using it here to try and point to this irony is that it's completely separated from us. And it is always mediated, always distantiated, always put through a conceptual frame. And that conceptual distance, or that estrangement that he says, even at the end of this chapter, the religious community is still missing, that estrangement from existence, right, puts us at this distance from it, wherein I can recognize the individuality, or the singular individuality of my spirit, the spirit that is I, which is equal to I. I can at least pretend to think that, in the face of immediate existence, or through immediate existence. In my being thrown into existence, I experience that, this universal existence of verifiable objects and colors and whatever, masses and velocities or whatever, magnitudes. This existence, I enter into it through an immediate existence. And he clarifies this as in 774, saying it therefore creates a world. This creating is representational thought's word for the concept itself according to its absolute movement. So this is my personal world, my phenomenal, my mindset. He's saying spirit gets thrown into an objective world, right? And it immediately, in order to engage with that world, it has to operate in the opposite direction. In order for it to relate to the universal world, it has to do it in an immediate, self-created, illusory way.
You said it, and it is
Spirit.
Okay, spirit. Okay.
And then he says, okay, well, so the spirit is creating this world, right? Well, let's look at the world of the spirit then. He says, well, the problem is that it's not a complete picture. The spirit did create this world of immediate experience in a way that takes part in this world of existence, but the world is not a complete picture of the spirit. It's the self. It's a picture of the world where the self is present in it, and it distinguishes itself from that world. The self is present, and this self being present in the world as such, as self, as this thing distinguished from that world, as a negative of that world, the situation, or this analysis of the world as having a self present in it, as a model or a diagram or a roadmap of a spirit that created that world, it is not yet spirit for itself. It has to become other to itself. And what I think this basically means is that I think that it needs to, there's this, for it to become spirit for itself, for it to become spirit for itself, it has to in some way become other to itself, in the sense that I think that that sentence, that phrase of becoming other to oneself, I think the way that he's, and I think the way that he's deploying that, and I have this from a separate section where he said that spirit gave things their opposite meaning, and I'd love to find that because I think it would make me sound so smart right now, but I don't know where it is right now, so I'll have to put that on hold. But my thought is that this must become other to itself thing is a part of its need to become spirit for itself. For it to become spirit for itself, it has to become other to itself. That sounds like a contradiction, but I think it has to become other to itself.
Yes, it is a contradiction, but at this stage, we realize that those contradictions contain each other and posit each other, so they're necessary movements of spirit, right?
Yes, I think yes, I think that they're necessary movements of spirit. I think it's just down to like where those movements end up. But I think what we can definitely agree on, I know is that he says that like this spirit not being spirit for itself, not becoming other to itself in this object and recognizing itself in this other, or cognizing itself in this other. The fact that it's not doing that puts it in a state where it connects immediate existence to thought, the immediate existence that is around it to this world of thought, and sees the connection of immediate existence to thought, right? The fact that it created this world of immediate existence, and that was so great. Fantastic. We had immediate reality. We had the world in our hands. But then immediate existence became, or got filed away into the category of thought, which means basically it's basically a subjective idealist skepticism or something. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, I don't know if anything immediately exists. I just think that. I could be totally wrong, and it sees this banishment of all of its immediate existence into the realm of hypothetical and thought and supposed and alleged and apparent, this kind of relinquishing of all of its immediate certainty and content, right? Its immediate world gets put into the world of thought. And it, at this point, because it is not spirit for itself, recognizes that exile of immediate existence into the realm of thought and appearance and seeming so, that banishment, it sees that as a contingent distantiation, as like an accident. It thinks that the fall from Eden, the moment that man or woo man, is walking in the garden of the animals, as he says, or of Eden, and it came upon the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, that it just happened to take a bite, and like he's saying, like, no, that is not the case. The fall, the fall, or the notion of evil, necessarily comes first. Deviation, in a way, precedes the thing deviated from. And so in that aspect, in the sense of God's absolute power or whatever, right? God is only God after creation. That's the idea, I guess, is that God is only God proper once he's created a world relative to which he can be God. And so the world that God created creates the God that created it. It's this retro-creative thing. The evil that swerved away from the straight and narrow, retroactively, there was no straight and narrow. There was no straight and narrow to begin with. There was no proper path. There was no true justice, no absolute morality that evil deviated from. It's just this evil that necessarily, for it to exist, presupposes that there is some norm, some sort of standard. And that, to me, I guess, is a part of the reason why I say that that God, in a way, is evil.
And it seems
Uh,
like good and evil only exist because, or at opposed to each other because they're being conditioned by the physical creation aspect rather than being in touch with thought. So that, I mean, Hegel used the word conditioned in regards to evil. It hasn't dialectically emerged from the aspect of having an engagement with its creation and knowing that those opposites posit each other. It's still kind of stuck in this sensuous phase, or still this aspect of the unhappy consciousness where it hasn't dialectically realized itself in another. Like, we're copying the same movement of spirit, and that's what's essentially considered evil. It's a necessary dialectical movement, not so much the picture thinking he warns about in those sections you had mentioned above, where they kind of like one's good and one's abstractly bad. It becomes good or abstractly bad when thought and being are inherently not united through spirit, I think.
yeah, and I guess, yes, I think I know we're still kind of dealing with like the end, and I'm being such a bore with these spoilers. I'm totally abandoning social convention, but uh I think that I found the thing that really, I think, kind of hammers home, or at least solidifies a point that I would try to put forward about the notion of spirit, and the nature of spirit and of spirited thinking. And it would be page 449 for us in our edition. I think for you, Joseph, that would be section 782 and 783. Yes, in fact, here, I'm going to grab that. Okay. In 782, I'm going to read a passage, in fact. This is a section that has after he talks about good and evil. Let me this is a brief kind of recap leading up to this paragraph. He says good and evil would be the same, theoretically, right? With this world of like, good and evil just being, we're on one side, evil is inwardly turned being for itself, and good is the selfless, simple, or the selfless simplicity of concepts or of anything, right? Evil is the inwardly turned being for itself, and good is the selflessly simple. And Hegel says, okay, well, those two concepts seem to be in tandem. They seem to be in harmony. They seem to be not really that opposed at all. And so they would be the same. But at the same time, they are also utterly different. He makes this point in 782, 781 and 782, and then kind of brings it home in 783. Says, actually, no. Yeah, 780 to 782. Never mind, I'm going to stop reading off numbers. So he says that they would be the same, but they are utterly different because pure knowing is pure negativity or the absolute difference in themselves, in the terms. The category within which they exist is this purely negative category. And so for them to be in that category, they have to be absolutely differentiated and distinct. In this realm of absolute difference, even in themselves, between themselves and in themselves. Neither have truth, but the moment itself has truth, the movement itself. And this is, Joseph, what you were saying. It's like neither of those moments have like the winning truth, but it's the movement itself that has the truth. You know what I mean? And that movement itself has truth, where the notion of something being the same is just an abstraction, and difference in itself, in a way, is self-equality. And so in truth, And the point of that idea is that in truth, in spirit, i.e. in movement, because he said the movement itself has truth, right? In truth, in this moving spirit, things are posited as sublated. And have you ever, yes, difference in itself in a way is that's true. But the idea is that in truth, or in this motion, this locomotive spirit, things are posited as sublated. Have you ever tried to give somebody advice? And that person that you give, maybe not giving them advice or whatever, but somebody's beseeching you with some sort of problem, and you offer up your thoughts as to, well, I guess I would think to do this, or I would think to do that, or maybe try this, or have you considered blank, whatever. And then they respond with this phrase, don't you think I've already thought of that? Or of course I've already thought of that. Of course I've already thought of all these things that you're saying to me. Of course. But for some reason, you don't necessarily believe them. You have this feeling that, I don't know if you ever actually thought of that. But I think that as soon as I present you with that information, it comes across and is interpreted in such a way as to be always sublated. It is always already sublated as soon as it comes to you, as a ridiculous idea, as a flight of fancy that doesn't need to be entertained. It's of course I've already thought of that,
But in that statement is the implication that the person who said, I've already thought of that, don't you think I thought of that, that they've rejected that as a potential action?
Well, the thing is, they've they haven't necessarily rejected it, because I could say, I thought of that, and then you could say, well, it's a good idea, and I would say, but also it's sublated. It's not like rejected or denied necessarily, but it's sublated in the sense that it's not the end of the line. It's not the answer that we're looking for. Things are posited as already sublated and the point is to exceed what he calls the spiritless is, this limit to our reality that is what is. We limit our sense or our concept to what is, and if we stick to what is, then we live in this, or we're operating in spiritless terms, and the point of all this, I suppose, maybe, is in 782 and 783 for real this time, is that each term receives a meaning in truth and spirit, in truth and in the motive spirit. Each term receives a meaning that is opposite to what it was before. And that means before it was to be interpolated in spirit or truth, you see. And so this is what he, I guess, this is the place, the one point in this section where he talks about this spiritual unity. In fact, this spiritual unity is completed, just as formerly for us or in itself, the opposite meanings have themselves unified themselves, even in the abstract forms of the same and not the same, of identity and not identity, have been sublated, right? And all of these terms of identity and non-identity, they function by taking on their opposite meaning. And this is kind of this sort of movement, the sort of movement that this would imply, this everything taking on a different meaning in this spiritual unity, this everything taking an opposite meaning in its spiritual unity. If you try to apply this coincidence of the opposites within meaning, then it would be possible to investigate whether it holds in logical succession or a logical sequence. And in this regard, Hegel applies this analysis to evil, and he says, because of evil, It is because of the presence of evil that man is compelled to take an inward turn, to seek the divine, and to discover their meaning, and to struggle for something against nihilism and against suicidal ideation, I guess, or whatever. But evil itself is this taking an inward turn. So the remedy to evil is the evil. The evil itself is its own cure. And it is its own ground. It presupposes itself. It's a circle that, or I guess just a path that presupposes its own end. And that path is the path of evil. And I think that there's one Hegelian argument that I was really shocked by. I read the minutes of this meeting about how does Hegel respond to the problem of evil. It was some paper written for some talk. If you Google Hegel on the problem of evil, you'll find it. And it was like the opening introductory essay or speech for this group of people who like Hegel, I guess. But they just argued that the whole point was that the problem of evil was not so much a problem at all, because without evil, good couldn't exist. You know what I mean? This is standard pseudo-Hegelianism, I think. That is like, oh, without evil, good couldn't exist. So evil is just this aspect of good where good deploys parts of evil, you know what I mean, to further its own end, which is where people come from when they say things like, the Holocaust was terrible, yes, but, and then they say something horrible, like about how great it is to be a Jewish person in the United States or the world in general right now. And I'm not necessarily saying that it is. I'm not saying that that's even true, but they would make a claim. They would at least, or they would say, yeah, you get the point. Yes, this tragedy happened, but there's this redeeming great good about it. That to me is good deploying evil to further itself. But I think that Hegel is asserting here through this reading that evil comes first, and that evil, in a way, deploys good as this aspect of I don't know, not destroying itself or something. I don't know what the purpose is of necessarily of evil deploying good, but either way, I think it is that evil takes the precedent. Evil is the one that deploys good. Evil is the thing of which good is a part of. Good, it's not that evil is this necessary little attachment to good, and good is the ultimate value, but that good is this kind of response to evil. But it's structured in such a way that it is always read or interpreted as the primary value. It takes the place of the primary value because the first move is a deviation. It's a fall. It's an inward turn or a contraction. And all of these things in this dimension are sublated, I guess. And that, I guess, kind of lends me to that thinking. But yeah, that's why I think God is in a way evil. God is like the ultimate evil in a way.
So are you saying it that way because of chronology? I mean, evil precedes good. That is good coming from evil, not emerging at the same time. Or good preceding evil.
I think we could maybe theorize about what came first, like the chicken or the egg, or the devil or God, or good or evil, like in the chronological procession of the unfolding of reality or experience or whatever. But I think that Hegel I think that Hegel asserts, how could I put, like this dedication to,
Hunter, the reason why I asked it is I was trying to make sure I was understanding your interpretation of Hegel. I honestly don't have a clue. I don't have an opinion about this. It sounded to me like you were saying it was Hegel's argument that the evil was primal. Maybe that's the wrong word. Had primacy in terms that it existed first.
yeah.
It's but I think he warns about that, like that's the ultimate conclusion of the picture thinking that we can come to when we're trying to find the origin of evil, or if we think of it in pure thought and abstraction in that regards. It's not so much of, where did it come from, since it can go to this infinite recursion of it, but it's more of a necessary otherness within God as spirit.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily that, like, it's not necessarily that God is an ultimately generally evil being, or that things are generally evil. It's just that for the notion of a good or a God or a positive to be consistent or stable or functional in representational thinking, it has to follow this logic of a thing presupposing itself. Evil forcing us to take an inward turn, but evil doesn't arise until we take that inward turn. It's like a catch-22 that got itself started and can't stop. And yeah, this once it, or I think once there is this sort of movement of good and evil, if you want to call it that, or of the fall and the forbidden fruits of Eden, or whatever it is that we're banished from, it's not necessarily that, because it is logically necessary for God and his goodness to occur as a result of, or as a part of this evil, this sort of overarching evil. Because that is the case, it does not necessitate that God is therefore generally or ultimately or principally evil, but that evil is an aspect of our experience and of any theoretical experience of something like a divine essence, which would mean that there is some fall even in God. There is some death or darkness or failure or lack. And the way that Zizek actually interprets this weird part of Hegel and says, he thinks it's that there's a part of God that even God doesn't understand, that he can't even talk about, he doesn't even get, and can't really enunciate. And that's what happened at the end of the book of Job. But that's Zizek talking, but yeah.
I guess that's, my reading of this section, particularly seven. Let me get it here. I'm sorry, I should actually have the text in front of me. With 781 and 782, where did he talk about death? That was at the end of 784. It's like the problem of evil is really like the necessary otherness of God. The aspect of like the creation itself is the being, the form of logos, the form of creating for itself, which is, an otherness and a necessary aspect of what we would consider evil with picture or representational thinking. Whereas the fall is our experience of withdrawing into ourselves as well, just as spirit did. And from what I read of this section, particularly where he said, the self-consciousness therefore actually does not die, as the particular self-consciousness is pictured as being actually dead, but in its particularity dies away in its universality, i.e., in its knowledge, which is its essential being, reconciling itself with itself. So the way I interpreted that was, it wasn't so much the actual incarnation of a traditional Christological Christ figure, it was the actual death of Christ which led to the reconciliation. It was that moment on the cross where that actual death was a part of the movement that the spiritual community needs to recognize with its unhappy consciousness and religious practice and customs. It needs to constantly emulate in its realization within the community rather than just pure theological representational thinking.
Yeah, I think that the the subtle danger that I think he's pointing to there in that passage, what is it? Is that 782? 780, let's no, actually that would be like 780, 783, 784.
That was 785 I just read.
I see, yeah,
Yeah, it's
785.
like
Yes.
second.
We still need to
huge
see the
difference,
the coming to be the other. Self-consciousness aims to apprehend representational thoughts as such. Death is transfigured from the non-being of individuals to the universality of spirit in the religious community. And it dies, or its particularity dies in universality in its knowing, the essence reconciling itself with itself. Yes. I guess I feel like the or one of the potential, I guess, dangers of this. There was a section that I had that really, I think, captured the spirit I wanted to say, but I can't remember it. But I think that a danger that is presented there by the notion of the doing of the religious community. The doing of the religious community as the being of spirit or of Christ or whatever, right? I feel like it can't just be that, you know, Christ died on the cross and that was a symbolic or metaphorical experience that came onto the mythopoetic landscape and altered our, I guess, positions or system of thinking or approach or whatever, you know, irrevocably, or I guess that is a way to look at it. But I think that Hegel, when he says that it dies in its particularity, dies in universality, and its essence is reconciling with itself, I guess I feel that I think I get where you're coming from. And this is Calcavage. Calcavage agrees. Calcavage puts forward, I'm going to say this. I think I split off from Calcavage here in this reading. Calcavage puts forward the idea that the religious community is, in a way, this embodied spirit. You know, spirit is present in the community of believers or whatever, right? But I feel like there's this implicit, maybe not implicit, but this sort of subtle danger of adhering to a revealed or absolute religion of any particular community or whatever, you know, as this engendering or expressing of spirit, of this actualization of the essence. And I know what you might be thinking, to go on to like page, or not page, but like
in 787, doesn't he actually warn that the community doesn't possess it? Like in 787, 1, 2, 3, 4 down, I have this one highlighted.
Okay, yeah.
The community also does not possess the consciousness of what it is. It is spiritual self-consciousness, which is not an object to itself as this self-consciousness. So it doesn't actually, I don't think, I didn't read that as any particular religious community having that.
Well, I don't mean it's any particular religious. I didn't mean to respond to the idea that there was any particular religious community either. Just that, like, I think that that's a good section to point to, but I guess to I guess just try and put forward this idea in a semi-clear way at all. uh, I think that the religious community, and its relationship to the divine essence is one of external validation. It's of being externally validated in a way, not necessarily in the way that you might think, because one could think, okay, God might have been a real guy, maybe like some sort of supernatural entity, who then, and I'm just being hypothetical, who then, let's say, came down to earth, manifested himself wholly and completely in this corporeal body in the shape of a human, which happens to have been in the shape of him retroactively. So he comes down and then he dies. And then we can interpret from that a few things. Okay, did we kill God? That would be my first thought. My second thought would be, did he go home? Did he return back to heaven or something? And the third, I suppose, would be to think of what our relationship to that God or that individual, that God as an actual singular individual person, what our relationship to that was and what it is now. And what that is such that the resurrection of Christ occurs, and I'm just using Christianity as an example, but Christ says, touch me not, to Mary Magdalene. She says, touch me not. And to Thomas, or whatever his name is, who's like, I have to touch him. I want to see if he's real. If he really resurrected, it's really the Son of God, and it's really the King of Jews, and it's Jesus the Nazarene. I want to touch him. And he says, touch me not. And I think that if we can in any way find any sort of constancy between our relationship to him prior and our relationship to ourselves now, it's like this is the moment where you realize that things have to change very radically for everything to stay the same, basically. For our relationship to God to stay the same after the event of Christ, things have to completely change radically forever. And what I mean by that is that things stay the same in the sense that Christ, as an agent of God, as an agent of the potentia absoluta of God, the absolute endless power of God, sacrifices himself and even goes to the point of being atheistic for at least a second on the cross, right before he dies, and says, Father, Father, why have you forsaken, or my God, why have you forsaken me? And in that moment, we experience this ultimately spiritual move of being totally connected to God and Christ, but only through this absolute atheistic disconnection and silence of God. The only time where Christ ever actually understood what it was like to live my life, or to be there for me in whatever way that all these pastors and preachers tell me that he is the moment where he was an atheist and he doubted everything and he lost his sense of faith, and he was at the bottom of his rope. He was at the end of his rope, basically, But right there, that sense of despair and hopelessness and suffering, that is the sense in which Christ is actually with me. It's like there's a movie called Shooting Dogs. There's a movie called Shooting Dogs about British. It's about a group of British missionaries and teachers who go to Rwanda before the genocide. And it's starring Hugh Dancy, the guy from Hannibal, plays the main character. Never mind. There's a scene at the end where there are some civilians trapped in a school building. Hugh Dancy's character and the other British missionary are trapped in the building as well. And around the building is surrounding them. There's a group of fighters, I think, trying to continue the Rwandan genocide through this like countryside, storming buildings, ransacking places, killing everybody, standard fare stuff for a genocide. And Hugh Dancy enters into a conversation with this missionary and says, you know how they say that God is always with us and that God is always trying to help us and God is there to be there for us, like in horrible moments, at our lowest. And the missionary says, yeah, I know. What's the point? What are you asking? What's going on? And Hugh Dancy's character is like, can you honestly tell me that you think that God is here with us right now? Like seconds before we are killed, I'm about to get killed. Are you serious? These are children. And he says, yeah, I think Christ is here with us. I think he's suffering right here with us, And I think that's the only way that Christ can be with us is in suffering. I think that loss, this death is the inverted mode, the ultimate spiritual inverted paradoxical mode in which we regain something like a connection to God. And the only point that I was trying to make earlier is that I think that, okay, I remember the section that I actually wanted to bring up. I remember, do you remember when he talked about the scorn of absolutes or the universal as a theory, the universal in its theoretical aspect, or was that? Yes, this is actually from last week's reading. This is from last week's reading. For us in the Cambridge edition, the 2018 Terry Pinkard Cambridge, this would be page, I think 428. Yes, 428, 427 to 428. It's section 745. That's for you, Joseph. If you want to, yeah, 745. And in this section, he's talking about comedy and the role of the art religion. You remember back at the beginning of this reading, he's talking about comedy, the art religion, and what's revealed by comedy. He says comedy's actual self-consciousness as the fate of the gods. It displays the irony of things wanting to be for itself. So the next point that he makes in 745 and 746, more so in 745, is the thing that is revealed in this comical spectacle is between the universal as theory and concerns of practicality, or the concerns of practice. And this, in a different way, I guess, to in fact, here. Yeah, I want to, yes. I'm going to just read this sentence and then I'll tell you what I think it means. This is, I think, the last sentence or the second to last sentence and then the last sentence of 745. He says, and this is in the Cambridge, however much the principle of its singular individuality, when separated from the universal, makes itself stand out in the genuine shape of actuality, and however much it openly appropriates the polity whose secret harm it is, still, what is immediately revealed is the contrast between the universal as a theory and that which that with which practice is concerned. The contrast between the total emancipation of the immediate singular individuality's purposes, right, and the universal order altogether, and the scorn with which that singular individuality, shows for such order. It's between universal as theory and the concerns of practice, between emancipation from universal orders, universal emancipation. He's making a lot of claims here. He's saying that universal emancipation takes place on the floor of universal thinking and in the world of universal as a theory and in the world of theory and abstraction in a way. It's between universalist theory and the concerns of practicality. It's from actual universal emancipation and a general feeling of scorn for any such universal, right? Which he would say is more in line with the concerns of practice, right? is to just scorn universals. And this is where a lot of pragmatic Hegelians and Stoics get off kind of being really dismissive, I think, towards some existentialists that I've come into contact with. Some pragmatic Hegelians and so on can sometimes be a little dismissive, seeing existentialist literature often as just an expression of a scorn for universality, like it's this childish expression of anger or whatever. But my point is, so you have this universalized theory that is the emancipation from universal orders, right? I think that the potentia absoluta of God, when I said that Christ was this agent of the absolute potential of God or whatever, right? That in a way, the absolute power itself, the notion of an unintelligible, absolutely excessive, absolute potential God that can do anything, right? That in itself can only manifest itself in a meaningful way within my system of ideas in the form of an impossible miracle, an absolutely impossible boundary breaking miracle, right? A total death defying stunt or something, the absolute. And in a way, an emancipation from any possible universal law or order or whatever, right? And so the potentia absoluta of God, the fact that through God, I'm going to put this in Christian terms, the fact that through God all things are possible means that we can authentically struggle for real emancipation in brotherhood with fellow Christians, and with our fellow man, if we so please, I guess, depending on the sect of Christianity that you ascribe to. But if Christ comes down and gives himself up and is this sacrifice which gives forth, which is the spirit-giving event, this event that gives forth spirit, right? We can agree on that. And I'm not even saying you have put forward anything of this argument that I'm kind of critiquing. I don't think you have. I'm just saying, just in case you were thinking of it, like I'm, like I'm suspicious. No, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I see a lot of people do this all the time. And it's that I think the point of Christ dying on the cross is that he died twice in a way. He died in this way where not only did he physically become, like, cease to be, but he delivered a one final miracle before he died. He delivered one final miracle in being the Son of God and capable still of absolutely identifying. And what's the extreme of identifying with somebody but feeling like you're trapped with them? What's a good example of the extreme of identifying? And you ever heard of a friendship forged in a foxhole? That's, I think, Christ's position with humanity at that point, being imprisoned with humanity, stuck on earth, damned, forsaken, forgotten by God. That is the gesture. That is the moment. That is the spirit giving activity. But to follow in the spirit with which Christ acted as the agent of absolute power and then performed a further absolute miracle, and then argued that he was not to be touched in his resurrection. I think that Christ, and we don't even have to stick to that Christ, but I think that the sort of spirit that Hegel is sort of talking about here, right, is such that it would, in a way, it would be kind of for naught, or it would be we would risk abandoning that emancipatory capacity. We would risk leaving behind the beautiful parts of Christianity and the meaningful parts of what it means to have an actual relationship to God, and of forgetting all of these things if we allow ourselves to think of a total identity between the spirit of a community, any religious community at all, the spirit and being and actions of that community as being the full expression of the spirit, you know? And that being the mode through which God is actualized. It is the mode through which God is actualized, but it is always a thwarted actualization. And he hints at that at the end of this chapter, but you know, it would just be, to put this in a totally different way, it would be like we had one set of rules, one big boss. Let's say we had a big boss, and Christ came down and said, you don't need to listen to any more big bosses. All right. And I will fight for that value, and I will argue for that to the day I die. And then he dies. And then somebody else comes in after he's died and says, hey, you see that corpse up there on the cross? We should make him the next big boss. And then everybody's like, well, fucking yeah, right. I think so. That sounds great. Let's make him the next big other, the next big authority, the next naive paternal authority that will dictate my life. Let's just reaffirm a new set of laws and codes and regulations like Hammurabi. Let's and the Epic of Gilgamesh and whatever, the different just codes and epics. He talked about the first language and this just torrent of epics and languages and codes and systems that just proceed over one another and collapse and fall over one another in this deluge. I think that Christ's and Hegel's point is that we are not doomed to the cycle forever of losing old masters and gaining new ones, I guess. And we run the risk of abandoning that idea in being too overconfident in the religious community's actions as a model or an action of spirit as the absolute essence. That is my argument, I guess. And I don't think anybody here is really arguing anything else or anything radically different or opposed, but I'm just, yeah, I don't know. I'm just making arguments for the YouTube commenters with them in mind. Like I'm trying to like guess what they're gonna say, and then I'm like, well, you know what? Before I let myself be open to criticism from my biggest fans, you know, I gotta make sure I set the record straight. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. I don't know.
Yeah, he's gonna be like, yeah, just skip to like an hour and 17 minutes in. That's when like the sensible stuff, starts,
I think I just heard somebody milling about in Travis and I's living room. That's all. I think I know who it is too. It's our friend Evan. But yeah, okay. Well, yeah, go ahead. If anybody has anything that's interesting. Otherwise, I was going to pick on Travis and tell him to tell me what was the most interesting part to him, and that wouldn't be fun for anybody.
No. Right at the very end of your exposition, I'm trying to understand your understanding of Hegel. Is there a hint or more than a hint? Because you said, the big guy, you know, Jesus was saying you don't have to listen to the big guy, but then someone says, hey, what if Jesus was the big guy? Is there a hint in Hegel that he's saying sometime in the future, human beings would be able to transcend the need for a big guy, however defined? And that would be part of their human realization of their own capabilities?
I think that that Hegel would assert that, and this is going back all the way back to an earlier part in the book when he said a physician or a physiologist or something could map out every part of the human and every part of human nature and could have him completely understood, and then with a single day's moderate effort, man could be incomprehensible again for another century, you know. And I think this my basic point is that this is a realm, this realm of spirit and spiritual shapes is a place where things gain this meaning that is totally opposite to the meaning that they had before. Things are inverted, the space is twisted, and the logic doesn't really match up with how we think of ordinary causal or realistic logic in experience, you know. It just doesn't. And I think that this sort of weird, warped, twisted space is not necessarily tending toward any particular point in human progress. I would like it to. I would very, very, very much like it to. I really, really want it to be the case that I could have actual hope in my heart that I and the people that I love and my maybe my future offspring or whatever could imagine a place, a mode of existing. To imagine that people after me, that future generations could live in a world where they could decide for themselves what it is that they want before somebody else comes in and tells them what they want for them, right? Having a big boss, having a set of cultural determinations which kind of affect your decision making, etc. You know what I mean? To have this destitution of the subject, this absolute loss and emptiness and death, you know, that Hegel talks about. I don't think he would say that it's inevitable, but I think he would say that it's not impossible and that it's not a bad, it's not all bad. I think he would point to something like, okay, on two ends of the spectrum to me. There's like the magnitude of structural power, right? The magnitude of like governmental organizations and bureaucracies and coalitions, etc. Associations, right? They're powerful and so on. They have money and resources, organization, blah, blah, blah. But then in this other sort of sense, I think that he's very critical of these state apparatuses and the sort of propensity for the institutionalization or the legalization of a problem to cause the very downfall of the attempt to solve that problem to begin with, where to become a person, to become a legally recognized person is apparently a loss, and this emptiness and this failure, right? So there's this power and this beauty, but this soul sucking emptiness and failure in just in the mechanisms of trying to run a city council, for example, right? Like in any sort of like governmental establishment of who is and isn't a citizen. In like Jamestown in 1607, I think he would say that happened. For something like this other case, this spiritual world of everything kind of getting inverted and all of our meanings being backwards and so on. I guess I just think that he's not saying that this world of inverted and bizarre, seemingly unorientable reasoning is heading towards some sort of particular path or point or predictable sequence, but that we are in a position right now as thinkers in the modern project where it not only, I guess to him, he would, maybe this is just because of his sense of duty or obligation to others or whatever. I mean, just this is his man as like a person. He might feel that it behooves us, if we're going to call ourselves philosophers, it behooves us in a way to consider our association with each other and our collective goal or mission or challenge or problem. And the problem or the challenge is modern thought. The challenges of modern thought that aren't the same challenges as ancient thought, where it was like totally reasonable and a totally living proposition to say that like everything is made of water. It was like, oh, that actually, sure. I mean, it's fucking, it could be anything. It could be air, you know? But
It's the reason why I asked that was because of the content of your analysis, and also my sense, and tell me your take on it and everybody's take on it, but that Hegel was concerned about human freedom. I mean, and it wasn't just, freedom from governmental restraint, but rather like the totality of what it would mean to be a free human being. And then how can we get there?
Yeah, I think that's absolute knowing or subjective destitution. And I think that is something like the position that Christ was on the cross. But that's my basic answer.
Yeah, because like the thing I found fascinating about that for freedom, in the aspect of kind of like the reconciliation between self and thought, because like he in 755 he used like a really big buzzword in classical theology, which is kenosis, and he kind of defines it as an externalization, which I found like really fascinating, because kenosis in the Quine means to empty or to relinquish. It doesn't mean to externalize. So it's a fascinating aspect of in 755 where he says spirit has its two sides, which are presented above as two converse propositions. One is this, that substance alienates itself from itself and becomes self-conscious, and the other is the converse, that self-consciousness alienates itself from itself and gives itself the nature of a thing or makes itself a universal self. And then he says the externalization, like one sentence down, or kenosis of substance, its growth into self-consciousness expresses the transition into the opposite, the unconscious transition of necessity. In other words, that substance is in itself self-consciousness, which I think really kind of plays a little bit in what we were talking about way further down in the community itself, where they actually talk about death and Christ's death and the cross being some form of externalization of the aspect of God as pure thought and the aspect of man as pure self in spirit, to the point where it's in that death that there's a reconciliation between the two, a unification that's almost like an externalization found within spirit in that moment. Because he says in 787 that death loses this natural meaning in spiritual self-consciousness. It comes to be, as it's just stated, a notion. Death becomes transfigured from its immediate meaning, viz. The non-being of this particular individual, into the universality of spirit who dwells in his community and dies in it every day and is daily resurrected. So in the death and resurrecting is kind of like this communal aspect of the tying of being for self, where the spirit was made man, in the full aspect of the essence of spirit and thought. And it wasn't so much like the traditional Christological definition of the incarnation that defined or unified man. It was in the death aspect, the externalization of it, that did. that has to be constantly done in the religious community for Hegel, that you're free to do. He almost made the aspect of reconciliation, resurrection, and reconciliation borderline syllogistic.
No, and yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of instances where he takes on that sort of mode or like approach, that sort of approaching syllogistic logic. You know, there in fact there are certain situations that where he really does just kind of deploy that sort of like, and it's just for like, you know, simplicity's sake. Sometimes he's like, all right, you know what, let's get the Aristotelians all excited about this one, you know, like for the fellas in the back, you know.
Oh yeah, I like that little Aristotle reference towards the end. It was kind of a little subtle jab.
Yeah, he sometimes engages in these modes to like this syllogistic logic. I agree. I guess I think that he uses that mode of analysis to present this sort of, it's like he's trapping himself in an iron box or something. It's like he's painting himself into a corner on purpose. It's like he's, I don't know how to like, it's like, I just think that he is using logical forms to bring us to a point in accepting this sort of unfolding of spirit in its logical form, right? In the form of the community of believers or whatever, the most plausible space for religion to exist or to unfold, or for spirit to exist or to unfold in any sort of meaningful way. But at the same time, I think that he has taken great pains to insist at every step in the way, or on the way, or to build up like this many 1,000-page long, like this, I guess actually 450-page long Jenga tower that is like, it's like, you think it's gonna be awesome, right? Oh yeah, we're gonna get to absolute knowing, and there's gonna be cake and ice cream and laser tag and shit, and like we're gonna have total reconciliation, and the spirit of the community is like the total spirit of God. That's God's actualization. We are God. Yes, like it's like kind of getting you excited, you know, getting like the Thomistic people kind of excited. If they follow the syllogistic stuff and just ignore everything else, they'd be like, all right. But I think that based on just this structure by which the logic of spirit adheres, you know, this spiritual unity of identity and non-identity, and this like presupposing itself and sublated positing and deathless dying, or the dying of death, this sort of pattern in the treatment of concepts leads me to believe that the community of believers is going to be rife with problems. That the community of believers is going to provide us with an intersubjective space to engage with our ideas and with each other, right? We produce a space where we can all come and talk, you know, like in a town hall or something. What we're doing, here's what, okay, to put this in the Hegelese, I'm going to put this in the most Hegelian terms I can think, all right? It would be to take the content of our subjective practice as that which can be altered or can be engaged with, but to take the form of the intersubjective practice as a given, and to then engage in the myth of the given. To take the form of the intersubjective practice as a given, and that form is community. That form, in fact, is the language of the community of believers. And I think that one point that he would want to stress, and all I'm saying is that this would be a point that he wants to stress, is that to take that form as given would be to deny or to fail to recognize the degree to which that form exists as a result of an internal failure and the breaking of the bounds of that form. And to me, I guess that's kind of like the the internal foreign territory of language, that sort of thing. There's just going to be this problem with the approach. And that problem is that we're never satisfied and we'll never fit our contours. And the truth of spirit is abyssal circularity. In fact, go to page 441 for me. Actually, I'll get to the section number in a second, but I just want to point out something that I think is just crazy. I think, because I swear, I feel like I've been stressing this sort of like negative angle, and for a long time, and it feels like only on this reading did he really came full steam ahead on this idea. In section 770, on page 441 in the Cambridge, section 770, I'm going to read the whole thing aloud. There are therefore three moments to be distinguished: essence, being for itself, that is the otherness of essence, and for which essence is, and being for itself, that is self-knowing in an other. The essence into its only itself, and its being for itself, and the self-relinquishing, it is only at one is with itself. Is the being for itself, which excludes itself from the essence. Is the essence knowing of itself. It is the word, which when spoken, relinquishes the speaker and leaves him behind and emptied and hollowed out, which is likewise immediately interrogated. And it is only this hearing and interrogating of itself that is the existence of the word. In that way, the differences which are rendered are likewise immediately dissolved, as they are rendered, and they are equally immediately rendered, just as they are dissolved. And the true and the actual are this very moment, or this very movement, circling around within itself. So we have these three moments of spirit: essence, being for itself, other to its essence, and then being for itself as self-knowing another. So essences, and then he makes this crazy statement in 770. Essence's knowing of itself is the abyssal circularity of language, and therefore of the true and the actual. Language and the true and the actual follow this movement of abyssal circulation around oneself in hearing and interrogating. This is what it means for the absolute essence to be spirit, right? And that's what he says in the next sentence in 771. This movement in itself expresses the absolute essence of spirit, And so I guess, I don't know, it seems to me like this absolute essence as spirit, or this absolute spirit as pure essence, not even if we are to limit it to the realm of the abstract pure essence, but to free it from that and to accept its nature as this fallen thing in spiritual unity of identity and non-identity, it seems like it still maintains that aspect, that abyssal circularity. And that abyssal circularity, the true and the actual being the very movement circling around within itself of language and of the true and of the actual, it seems like it will get in the way of the religious community's attempts to actualize their purpose through some sort of code or law or enumeration. But at the same time, this whole thing is taking place within this frame of the acceptance or the proposition of the likelihood or the plausibility of impossible miracles, in absolute potential and in absolute failure and an absolute difference and things like that. So I think there's a reason. Okay, to put this in more modern terms, if you guys know anything about Zizek at all, I think that Zizek would say that, like, yes, Hegel sees the community of believers as being the place of the spirit, but this isn't necessarily the answer. We don't need to just get spirit. The goal isn't spirit. The goal is absolute knowing. And absolute knowing is a different state than just the enunciation of spirit, And that's why most communities of believers can be called a different thing: ideologies, consistent or agreed upon ideological mechanisms. The Hegelian notion of the community of believers is, in a way, a set of people who agree to an ideology. And that is not, to me, the best that we can do, I guess. But then again, I have no concept and not even the language to conceptualize the concept of a post-ideological or a non-ideological frame, which I guess would require subjective destitution or something.
Well, look at yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too. Not that I was thinking about in terms of Hegel, but when you look at the ancient Mediterranean world, they really didn't have what you could call ideology. And so that didn't mean things were great necessarily. Like, oh, they didn't know what they lacked, right? But what I mean is us looking back at that time, I remember one of my professors saying, yeah, if someone would have asked Alexander the Great, why do you want to conquer the world? He'd be like, dude, what do you mean I want to conquer the world? Because I want to conquer the world. I mean, isn't that in and of itself the thing? And so, like, our modern question, like, what's the project? Like, okay, once you conquer the world, what are you going to do? It's like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? I'll collect taxes. I'll make sure there's running water. I mean, things will be great for people. They won't be invaded by anybody because I've already done that. We're just going to have really good defenses and things will be great. And this peace, generate trade, whatever. And yeah, people, I guess, will write books and make some paintings and it'll be great.
I'm kind of curious to see where he goes with absolute knowledge, knowing, because it's almost like he's saying that self-consciousness has not yet perfected itself in community. I mean, he goes on in 787 to say that the kenosis of a substance is taken by the self to be an action implicit in the nature of substance. The self does not grasp and truly comprehend it, or does not find it in its own actions as such. And then he starts, where does he say that? There was one part here I really liked where he said, self-achieved appears as something in the distant past, just as the individual divine man has a father in principle and only an actual mother. So too the universal divine man, the community, has for its father its own doing and knowing, but for its mother eternal love, which it only feels but does not behold in its consciousness as an actual immediate object. So in a way, it almost seems like it's aware of universal self in the community, but it hasn't found or perfected that in absolute knowing.
Yes. And the thing is, yeah, like my position here, that's like we still haven't found it in this community thing, is not in an attempt to be like, fuck communities and they're just these hippy dippy communes that are trying to take my freedoms or whatever, or like trying to trick me into diverting my righteous studious path toward absolute knowing or whatever. It's such that this collapse, it's not even a struggle, really. He talks about it in a different point where he's like, he makes this point that I think is really like against or kind of counter to things that like Jung and people like that say. But it's like, there's a point in this section somewhere around like page 447 in the Cambridge edition. I forget what section that is, but he says that it's not a problem of terms struggling against each other until the opposition dissolves, right? Between like community and pure thought, wherein we would have something like absolute knowing, right? He says each term is self-sufficient and has to dissolve by itself, and that which exists in itself has no truly stable existence. Spirit and actuality are both self-alienated, and their death and their resurrection is as spirit. There's just this self-sufficient dissolving, this self-sufficient dissolution, to where the religious community and its striving is in a way, the religious community and its failure to actualize or to fulfill this necessity, this conceptual necessity that we're outlining, is what gives rise or gives space to the rise of absolute knowing. You know what I mean? And I think that death and resurrection is kind of the idea there. I think that
Yeah,
I think that
absolutely.
I think that we need, not only does that mean, that means two things for me, practically speaking. For practically speaking, that means we need to get to a point in social intersubjective practice where we have an agreement at the level of the implicit, right? That's the first thing. That's the community, right? And Joseph, like, would you, I don't know, well, that seems what that sense of the community is like a group of people, like the way he's saying, like a community of believers is a community of people who have some sort of implicit agreement. And I think we could, if we were to try and be like contemporary Hegelians trying to solve world problems for like UNICEF or something, or trying to give some talk at TED, it'd be like Hegel would argue from this communitarian thing that we need to have an agreement at the level of the implicit, just some sort of a thing that we don't even need to confer with each other. It's just this like, yeah, of course. It's like murder is wrong. Murder is generally wrong. Yeah, I don't really have to work that hard to convince you of that. I don't have to, we can just, and even if you do kind of take up the other stance, I know for a fact that you are totally out there. If somebody says, I think murder is good, everybody in the room has a general agreement. This guy's kind of wild. Oh my goodness, this is some wild stuff, you know? And there's this implicit agreement that on certain things, like water is wet and sand is rough and coarse, and that you know, things, there are certain things that are implicitly agreed upon. That doesn't make them true. That does not make them true. That does not make them good. I want to say that it does not make them true or good in any way. Sometimes they are good and true. Sometimes people are right. Murder isn't good. You know, I'll agree with that. I think murder is bad, but there's just these things that are agreed upon. And once we have the next thing, the next point, practically speaking, is not only do we need a collective agreement as a community at the level of the implicit, but then we need to collectively recognize that that is not enough. That this collective agreement at the level of the implicit is in no way going to prevent any of us from having irresolvable conflicts and contradictions. And you know, for the movement of alienation and estrangement, that's not going anywhere, and it still moves us. That movement is still going, even though we're in a community at an agreement at the level of the implicit. That movement is still going to occur, and there are going to be those who strive for absolute knowing.
And it would be a necessary moment in that movement, right? For absolute movement. Like, it's not going to be like we've reached this transcendent stage where we're never going to get past that. It's going to be a necessary component of that movement, like you said.
Yes. And I think, and the weird thing is, I think that Hegel can potentially argue that he is in a position where he has some sort of access or experience with this absolute knowing by saying that he engaged in a German community of believers, for example, right? Like a German theological 1800 or, you know, 18th century to 19th century, revolutionary or not, German community of people who had agreements at the level of the implicit. He experienced what it meant to be in a community. And I don't necessarily think that he like loved everybody and thought they were all chill or whatever, but I just think that he could use that community and that implicit agreement as this way to open himself up to this place that he calls absolute knowing, relative to, and I know that sounds weird, an absolute that's relative, what? But I think it's an absolute knowing with reference to the game of transcendental theorizing, transcendental philosophy, transcendental and subjective philosophy. I think there was this horizon, there was this game being played, you know, Socrates or Thales or whoever you could say kind of kicked it off in a way, but then other people would say, no, Descartes really started it. And then other people would say, no, it was Kant where it really started, you know. People always trying to come up with places where the game really began. right? But Hegel did not try to start any game. He tried to end it. He tried to call it to its conclusion and say everything that can be thought has been thought. And now the only thing that is left is yeah, the only thing that is left is people who either haven't read my work or things that I haven't thought of, which means the unthinkable. You know what I mean? I have thought everything that could possibly be thought. And so, and I'm not saying that he's really thinking that he's coming to this dissolvement or this abolition of ignorance, but that in this state of absolute knowing, he's reached this sort of point after this experience of community and of reflexivity, you know, because the reflexivity of spirit is not like a telescope that you could point off into the universe and do whatever you want with. It's just this thing that bounces inside of itself, like streams of light and ideas are bouncing back and forth and communally coalescing and in this cooperative co-concrescence. In a way, they're just concreting and developing and affirming and denying, challenging each other. I know it's, but I see that as the basic thrust, as this was his attempt to end the game, and I think that he presents it to us as an open invitation to end our game, and to open up the future for the impossible, or for the unthinkable. What we today would look at and go, oh my God, that's unthinkable. Moderate changes to the system of global capitalist commerce. Oh my God, that's unbelievable. And I think Hegel would say, it seems like you guys are kind of wrapped up in the rules of this weird game you're playing. You should probably put that down. You're starting to think that it's real life, son. You know, I think Hegel would be like, I think it's starting to get to you. I think you're starting to think that the games are all, you know, let's call it. Let's call it tonight. Let's take a break. Let's do some stretches. You know, I think, I don't know. That's what it means for me to go from the community to absolute knowing. And that's what I think Hegel tried to do. And that's what I think we are in a position to do. But yeah.
Before I forget, your fingernails are fabulous. I love the black and white.
Thanks.
Gorgeous.
I had them done the other day, but they look like doo-doo fart now. But
No.
it's just, I put a matte, it was one coat and then a matte coat, and then they kind of shrunk and then whatever. But then
You did it yourself?
no, I had them done by a friend. And then I was like, I had a date the next day. I had like this really important date I needed to go on the next day. And I was like, I'm very heavily considering cleaning this off with like nail polish remover before this really important date. And then I didn't, because that same person who painted my nails hung out with me the next day around noon. And I was like, I can't get rid of it or else their feelings will be hurt. I'll be like, oh, sorry, I removed it. I don't know. So I didn't remove it and I kept it. And then I hung out with them. I was like, that's great. Then later on in that day, I went on that date. I still had these nails and I was like, I hope it goes normal. And they said, love your nails. And I was like, that's a W.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
That's what I'm talking about. Dude. Taking risks, making moves, you know? Fuck yeah. So thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no problem. Yeah, I love them.
I didn't say anything, but I wasn't sure if you were being Hegelian with your color choice, you know, black, white, the dialectic, back and forth.
I like that idea. Yeah, it's three white and 2 black on either hand. I might just redo it because it's actually not that bad. Whatever. Yeah. I like things like that. You know what else I like is wondering if Travis is ready to tell us his most important thought that he had today, or the most beautiful memory he's had in the last week, or if he wants to end the seminar before having to do that. What do you think, Travis? Where do you stand on that issue? What would you do if you had to pick between those?
Yeah, I think I did the seminar.
Well, then you can't tell Hunter if you're not going to tell the rest of us.
I won't tell anyone.
I think
keep it
that's
all to my- I
perfectly
keep it all to
okay
myself.
not to share something you're not comfortable with in a public setting that's being recorded in any way whatsoever. But yeah, no, I'm with there. Mine was seeing Coco. I love seeing Coco and the fingernails. Ed, I always miss when we can't see your cats.
Yeah, she was in a mellow mood. I guess I fed her enough, so now she's just passed out somewhere. Yeah, she was just. Yeah, I don't know what it is. My, you know how cats are. They just, I'm here and you have to deal with me. And then if I don't, then she sticks her ass in my face. And I'm like, oh, thanks.
Yeah,
Look, I'm
at
not
my
your
butt.
proctologist. Could you please get your starfish out of my face?
That's a blessing. You're getting a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, on what planet does she really think this is optimal for me? I just,
Oh,
and now that's maybe a Hegelian question. I mean, that's another type of consciousness, so.
I am interested to see where this goes. I'm really interested to see where this goes. So I'm excited for next week.
Is next week our last time?
Yeah.
For
yeah.
It is.
Wow.
Can we all just take a moment to mourn Nevitt? Farewell, Nevitt. We miss you. Eric,
Yeah.
Chase, everyone. Wish you were here.
Yeah.
Oh,
I hope
yeah, there was
okay.
Hegel or
Hegel.
No,
Hegel.
No.
I think
Nevitt?
Hegel's fine.
Nevitt is now Hegel. That's
Hegel,
it.
Nevitt is fine. I can
Nice.
guarantee. He's at
So
like
it wasn't an emergency. It was more just a family thing.
yeah. It was
Okay,
like a
okay.
picnic.
Well, you know him. He's very social, extroverted, loves going out.
He wanted to come.
Bar hopping with the boys.
Yeah.
He wanted to come. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to, but then, like a few hours ago, he realized he couldn't. But he also he wanted me to ask Hunter actually if you're a Christian now.
Yeah, like in the atheist sense, yes.
And that's what I told him. I thought that was the case. Yeah.
Yes, I'm. Yeah.
Like he is kind of. Yeah.
It's like how Zizek's a Christian in a way, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, I'm starting to feel like I'm more, because like there are parts of like Puritanism that I'm vibing with, like full on, and that's like, it's like not in like any of the interventionist way. Just whatever. I'm getting into discussions lately where I'm finding myself to be more and more outwardly like Christian in my approach. Where like I took this religious values test. I'm gonna put it on the Discord, but
God.
dude, it's so funny. I got
Religious values. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
hated
about
that.
that,
it
man.
tells
hated
you
that
like
test.
how Christian or Catholic you are. I got neutral in every single category towards every religion except for somewhat anti-Catholic, somewhat anti-Buddhist, definitely anti-pagan, and everything else neutral.
I'm very anti-Catholic, kind of
Yeah.
anti-Protestant, pro-Muslim, and like neutral towards like paganism and Satanism.
Where do you take this test?
I'll put a link to the Discord.
You
Yeah,
can literally
have
just look
fun.
it up on the internet. Religious
Yeah.
values test.
No.
It's like the
Yeah, if you go to
Christian-
Google and you type
Just-
in religious values test, you'll find it.
Please be careful what you click, though. Just go through the Discord that Hunter picks, because some of that stuff can be pretty nasty clickbait shit.
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
there's one on GitHub that I'll post.
Yeah. Because then they're like, well, click yes. And then you just agree to have all your personal information broadcasted to a datametric polling. So yeah, just go with what Hunter says.
Sure.
But
Thank you. Wait, yeah, in fact, actually, I'm gonna, okay. Well, I'm gonna go look for that. Okay, but, all right, sweet. Fantastic.
yeah, fun session. I always appreciate your insight, guys. Everyone, I appreciate your company. This is great. I'm sorry for the screaming in the background. My kids are playing the new Resident Evil on the Oculus Quest, so apparently
Resident Evil
it'll be
8?
fun. Yeah, 4, the one with Leon Kennedy.
Yeah.
It's
Dude,
on,
the
it's on VR now.
wait,
It's on
what?
VR. Yeah, no, the fourth one is on VR, and I played it for like 30 minutes, and they got a good kick out of Dad getting the crowd. Like when the chainsaw guy comes,
Yeah, the early chainsaw guy.
dude, I almost peed my pants. Like I was like, and we're gonna take a break. I'm gonna watch
Yeah.
cartoons for a little bit.
Yeah, I love that.
I don't even know what he says in Spanish, but it terrifies me.
All I know is they say mierda, and I know that means
No,
shit.
they say no Halo.
No, yeah, yeah.
No,
No
Halo,
Halo.
no
I don't
Halo,
like
no
Halo.
Yeah,
And I
they
love-
hate
I hate
Halo.
Master Chief.
And they have the guy. They have my favorite guy. The what are you buying? What are you
Yeah, that's
selling?
the
Like,
best, yeah.
what are you doing in this sewer with all these guns? I love you, you crazy man.
Oh my God. Yeah,
good
I
game.
love. Yeah, I love that.
All right, gentlemen. Appreciate
right.
you.
All right.
Take care.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Sayonara. So long. Farewell. Adieu, Wiedersehen. Goodbye.
Bye.